dinner in his house and sat them from the youngest to the oldest. And they all realized it and said, how did this man know who the youngest is to the oldest? So they marveled at that, but they still didn't suspect that this Egyptian official who invited them to dinner is their brother Joseph. Why? Because physically there was nothing that separated him from a dark-skinned Egyptian or brown-skinned Egyptian. It didn't, brothers and sisters. Let us go ahead and continue. Verse 2, please.
And he wept aloud, and the Egyptians and the house of Pharaoh heard. And Pharaoh said unto his brethren, I am Joseph. Doth my father yet live? And his brethren could not answer him, for they were troubled at his presence.
They were scared. That scared them, that surprised them. If you read the story, all those years they have been carrying the guilt of what they did to Joseph. They thought Joseph had been sold into slavery and been died off somewhere, treated harshly. They had no clue that this Egyptian official in front of them was verily their younger brother, Joseph, brothers and sisters. Why? Because once again, I have to reiterate the point that in ancient Egypt, and this was before the times of the Israelites and their exodus. The Israelites weren't even in the land of Egypt yet. Joseph was, as far as we know, he was the only person from the Israelite family that was in Egypt at this time. This is way before, brothers and sisters, this is about almost 500 years before Moses, okay? So if historians are trying to equate that, they believe that in the time of either Seti or in the time of Ramesses is when they try to put the Exodus story timeline-wise, then the story of Joseph was 500 years before the time of Ramesses or Seti. So brothers and sisters, if that's the case, then we know he was in Egypt at a time when it was ruled, totally inhabited by the indigenous people there who were people of color, brothers and sisters. Now, Joseph makes himself known unto his brethren, and they were troubled, but he let them know. Read verse 4 and we'll move on.
And Joseph said unto his brethren, Come near to me, I pray you. And they came near. And he said, I am Joseph, your brother, whom ye sold into Egypt. Now therefore...
No, that's it, brother. Thank you. Now, when you see this, you might think, well, that's nothing. Why do y'all even want to deal with this? Well, brothers and sisters, if you saw a movie with the depiction of black peoples on it, like there was a movie called Hotel Rwanda, which showed that great atrocity which happened in Rwanda between the Hutu and the Tutsi people. Now, what if 300-400 years from now, if that ever happened, they make a movie in that time about what happened back here, and this time, this great genocide, and they have some Europeans playing a part of the Hutus and the Tutsi. Us today would look at that as like, hold on, that's an egregious error right there. We know that those are people of color. Brothers and sisters, one of the most famous biblical movies ever made in America is The Ten Commandments, with Charlton Heston starring as Moses and Yul Brynner starring as Pharaoh. Do you know in that movie that when Moses, played by Charlton Heston, a white man, comes back to Pharaoh to bring the conquerings from the land of Ethiopia, he brought the king and the princess of Ethiopia with him. Now in this movie, do you know that those were the only black people in the whole movie? The people that came to portray the Ethiopians, because there is no way they could get away with trying to bring some Chinese-looking people or something to play the Ethiopians, right? So in the movie, they tried to be politically correct back in the 50s and have some blacks play the part of the conquered Ethiopian king. But brothers and sisters, don't you know that Moses should also been played by a black actor? And so should Pharaoh had, because we showed you in the beginning of this, and you know from history. Watch the Discovery Channel, go read whatever book you want. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, the Egyptians were just as colorful as the Ethiopians were, brothers and sisters. Anything you ever found in them have not showed any white-colored or fair-skinned colored Egyptians. Now, why are we dealing with this? This is not about racism. This is about establishing facts, brothers and sisters. The Egyptians historically are black people. The Ethiopians, without a doubt, historically are black people. If you do history, you'll find out the original Canaanites, who are the come from the same bloodline of Ham that the Egyptians and the Ethiopians do, are a people of color. Brothers and sisters, the children of Israel are a people of color also. Descendants of Shem are also a people of color. Now, let us go ahead and continue to move on. Now we're going to go into Moses. Now we're going to bring another man living among the Egyptians, a Hebrew Israelite living among the Egyptians. And let's see what his skin color may have been. Exodus chapter 4, and when you get it, brothers, start reading at verse 6, please. Exodus 4 and verse 6.
And the Lord said furthermore unto him, Put now thine hand into thy bosom. And he put his hand into his bosom, and when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous as snow.
Now, Moses was told, when I send you to the people, you tell them I sent you. And Moses said, well, the people going to be like, who is God? What is he? How I know? What I'm going to do? So when he got there, what Moses did was what God told him. He had a stick to throw down, turn the stick into a snake, all of that. But he gave him something else, said, Moses, I want you to stick your hand into your robe, basically into the bosom of his garment. When Moses pulled it out, his hand was white as snow. Now, if Moses was already white, it wouldn't have been no big deal to pull a white hand that you put in back out. But him being a man of color, when he stuck that hand in and it came out white, that is a miracle. And read verse 7.
Verse 7. And he said, Put thine hand into thy bosom again. And he put his hand into his bosom again, and plucked it out of his bosom, and behold, it turned again as his other flesh.
There ain't no man of color's hand turning into a white hand. Ain't no man of a white man's hand doesn't turn white, brothers and sisters, even when they are sick. You have a black man here putting his hand in his bosom, bringing it out white, and when he put it back, it turned back to the original color it was. Now, that's a miracle. Let us go over to chapter 2 of Exodus, and let us start reading about another thing of Moses here. Exodus chapter 2, verse 16.
2 and 16. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water and filled the troughs to water their father's flock.
So this is when Moses had killed an Egyptian, and Moses is on the run. He left Egypt, and he comes into the land of Midian. You have a priest of Midian who has daughters. They come in to feed the flock, and you have bullies there who trying to bully these women so that they can't feed their horses right away. They're going to feed their horses, their camels, their sheep, and all of this. Verse 17.
And the shepherds came and drove them away. But Moses stood up and helped them and watered their flock.
So Moses come on the scene and seen what these men were doing to Reuel's daughters. And Moses stood up and defended these women against the men who were trying to shoo them off. Continue.
And when they came to Reuel, their father, he said, How is it that ye are come so soon today? And they said, An Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds, and also drew water enough for us and watered the flock.
Now, I want to go back to this picture, the pictures that we showed at the first. Let us show the pictures that we showed at the first. What did they say? They said an Egyptian, Father, has helped us and had delivered us out of the hands of the shepherd and drew enough water for us so that we could actually feed the flock. Brothers and sisters, what did they call Moses? Did they say the Hebrew Israelite who looked like an Egyptian came? Or did they just say Moses was an Egyptian?
They said an Egyptian delivered us out the hand of the shepherds.
You know the story. Moses was raised in the house of Pharaoh. So when Moses came unto the women, brothers and sisters, he still had on his Egyptian garments. He black just like everybody else. Ain't no reason to think he anything other than an Egyptian, right? So brothers and sisters, these are just a few of the little things that when you read scripture that stick out to us, that just, it doesn't necessarily say here Moses was black. But you prove to me that people of more of a European look were sitting in the ancient times way back in the days of the early empire of Egypt, sitting up as officials and everything in Egypt. The first European that sat on a throne and rulership in Egypt was Alexander the Great, when he conquered Egypt under the Greek Empire and crowned himself the first European pharaoh of Egypt, brothers and sisters, okay? The first European woman that we know to sit on the throne of Egypt was Cleopatra, who was the daughter of Ptolemy, who was one of the Greek generals that inherited the southern part of the territory, which was the northern part of Africa and Canaan, when Alexander the Great died, and he